Shadows of eternity. Sometimes death comes for you gently, like fog rolling over harbor lights. Sometimes it screams through your window like a hurricane. And sometimes, just sometimes, it locks you in a box and makes you watch while everything you thought you knew dissolves like sugar in black coffee. My name is Tom McBride, and this is how I learned that the dead don't always stay buried and the living aren't always alive. Chapter 1: The Undertaker's Apprentice. In the shadow business, you learn to read the signs. The way morning light cuts through stained glass. The smell of formaldehyde mixing with yesterday's roses. The silence that isn't quite silence, more like the universe holding its breath. I should have paid attention to those signs the day my world tilted off its axis and rolled straight into hell. 1. Mrs. Stanton's 82-year-old body lay before me like a roadmap of someone else's journey, all those lines and valleys telling stories I'd never hear. My hands moved with practiced precision, applying foundation to her hollow cheeks, covering the bruises time had painted there. Same hands that once assembled rifle scopes in the dead of Afghan night. Same steady movements that had pieced together what was left of Martinez after that IED turned his Humvee into modern art. The dead make better company than the living. They don't judge. They don't ask why you wake up screaming at 3 a.m. Jesus, Tom, you've taken to this like a fish to embalming fluid. Uncle Wayne's voice crashed through my meditation like a sledgehammer through glass. His bulk filled the prep room doorway, 68 years of bourbon and bad decisions wrapped in a cheap suit. Still built like the linebacker he'd been before life tackled him hard. 22 years in force recon teaches you respect for the human form, I said, not looking up from my work. Living or dead, everyone deserves dignity in the end. I didn't mention the real education came from Fallujah, 2004. We'd been trapped in a school building taking fire from 3 sides. Rodriguez caught shrapnel in the throat. No medevac coming, no way out except through enemy positions. I kept him alive for 16 hours with combat gauze and pure will. When he finally bled out, I cleaned him up best I could with bottled water and a torn undershirt. Carried him out when we finally broke through. His mother got to see his face one last time. Wayne didn't need that particular ghost story. You've got the touch, nephew. That's rare in this business. Families need that, someone who sees their loved ones as more than meat. I nodded, continuing my work. 6 months since my discharge, 6 months of sleepwalking through civilian life. The funeral home was supposed to be temporary, a place to breathe while I figured out what came next. Instead, I'd found something like peace among the professionally dead. Here, I could still serve, still make things right, even if it was too late to matter. Listen, got something to tell you. Wayne shifted his weight, cleared his throat like a guilty confessor. Hired a new funeral director, guy with connections and West Coast polish. Alexander Croft, used to run some high-end mortuary in Malibu. Figure he can help us tap into the Maplewood Estates crowd. You know, where they bury their dogs in Armani. I nodded mechanically. Wayne was always chasing the next dollar, building his empire of endings. Me, I'd seen enough empire building to last several lifetimes, but the man gave me work when I needed it, and loyalty counts for something in this world. Starts tomorrow, think you'll like him, sharp as a surgeon's mistake. He lumbered off, leaving me alone with Mrs. Stanton, the only person in the room who understood the value of silence. 2. Alexander Croft arrived the next morning like death dressed for a dinner party. Black Tesla Model S, windows tinted darker than a confessional booth. He stepped out looking like he'd been assembled by a committee of fashion consultants, mid-40s, charcoal suit that probably cost more than most caskets, hair styled by someone who charged by the strand. His smile had been practiced in mirrors until it could cut glass. I watched from the supply closet, nursing my ritual coffee, black, no sugar now, trying to cut back. First thing I noticed, his eyes. They swept the funeral home like a sniper checking for targets, cataloging exits, evaluating assets, measuring shadows. I'd done the same thing, entering dozens of buildings where death was more than theoretical. He was hunting something. Then he spotted Wayne and transformed. Shoulders dropped precisely 2 inches, stance widened to appear more approachable, voice modulated down to trustworthy bass. The man was a shapeshifter in Italian leather. Mr. Morrison, his handshake probably came with a warranty. Such an honor to finally meet in person. Thank you for this incredible opportunity. Words chosen like ammunition, not job or position. Opportunity. Like we were offering him keys to the kingdom instead of keys to the hearse. And you must be the nephew. Wayne waved me over like a proud dog owner at Westminster. Tom, come meet Alexander. I approached with deliberate slowness. 2 decades of combat ops taught me that rushing shows weakness, and weakness attracts predators. Our new director looked like he ate weakness with his morning quinoa. Tom McBride. I offered my hand, grip calibrated just past comfortable. Alexander Croft. He matched the pressure without flinching. Military. 22 years, Marines, Force Recon. I kept it minimal. His eyes widened, genuine surprise before the mask snapped back. I'm honored, truly. I'm just a civilian, but I've always had the deepest respect for warriors like yourself. Real heroes. The voice changed again. Respect mixed with caution now, like he just realized the family dog had teeth. He straightened imperceptibly, mirroring my posture. Another transformation. This guy changed personalities like other people changed channels. Nothing heroic about combat, I said flatly. Just doing what needed doing. Like our work here, right? He smiled. We both deal with the aftermath of life's tragedies, just trying to bring dignity to the darkest moments. I let the silence stretch. Wayne looked pleased, like 2 prize bulls had met without goring each other. For the next hour, Alexander pitched his vision like a televangelist selling salvation. He talked about premium service portfolios, high net worth client acquisition, and vertical market integration. The main target, Maplewood Estates, the gated community where millionaires went to die with their stock portfolios intact. They want exclusivity. Alexander paced the break room like a caged motivational speaker. Their dearly departed don't want to share dirt with commoners. It's our opportunity to provide a more refined farewell experience. Wayne looked like a kid watching fireworks while calculating the profit margins. And you think we can land that contract? He asked. More than think. Alexander's smile could have sold ice in Antarctica. I've already arranged a trial run. Some tech mogul who's about to punch his final time card. Handle his send-off properly and the contract's ours. About to punch his time card. Interesting choice of words for someone who hadn't died yet. My instincts, honed by years of spotting ambushes before they happened, were sending up flares. Alexander Croft was running an angle, and I didn't know the geometry yet. But I knew how to gather intelligence. Watch, wait, catalog the tells. It's what kept me breathing in places where the wrong shadow meant a shallow grave. Time to see what our shapeshifter was really hunting. 3. Caroline never asked about my nightmares. 23 years of marriage, and she'd never once wondered why I woke up clutching invisible weapons, why I checked every window twice before bed, why I couldn't sit with my back to doors. The woman who'd once graced magazine covers now treated my trauma like uninvited houseguests. Ignore them long enough and maybe they'll leave. So when she suddenly developed an interest in the funeral business, my internal alarm system went from yellow to orange. Brought you lunch, Tommy. She materialized in the doorway holding a container of something that would go uneaten. Made your favorite, lasagna. She looked good. She always looked good. That was part of the problem. Caroline had fought aging like it was a personal enemy, and she was winning every battle. Same slim figure, same salon-perfect hair, same makeup applied with architectural precision. She'd maintained her exterior with the dedication of a classic car collector. Our relationship, that was the rusted chassis nobody saw. Thanks, put it in the break room fridge. I'll grab it later. She didn't move. Aren't you going to show me around? I've never seen the working areas. You want to see the prep room? I raised an eyebrow. Mr. Patterson's in there with a perforated bowel, not exactly lunch-friendly viewing. Oh, she wrinkled her nose. What about other areas? I set down my paperwork. 22 years in the Marines, countless ops in hostile territory, and she'd never once asked about my day. Now she wanted the guided tour. What's going on, Caroline? In all our years together, you've shown less interest in my work than most people show in their dentist's vacation photos. Now suddenly you're Martha Stewart of the mortuary. She shifted into defensive mode, slight shoulder rotation, chin up, eyes narrowed. I knew these signals better than my own combat hand signs. Just trying to show interest in your new career. Sorry for caring. The sarcasm dripped like acid rain. She spun on her designer heels and stormed out, leaving the container on my desk like a plastic peace offering. I sighed. Marriage was like a long reconnaissance mission. The longer you maintained position, the more likely you were to be compromised. The pattern continued. 3 times that week, Caroline appeared with food I wouldn't eat, questions I wouldn't answer, and increasingly transparent excuses. Twice, I saw her leaving Alexander's office with slightly mussed hair and the kind of flush that didn't come from exertion. At home, she started mentioning our new funeral director, with the frequency of a teenager with a crush. Alexander says the funeral industry is experiencing a paradigm shift, she announced over dinner, moving her salad around like chess pieces. New technologies, eco-friendly options, personalization services. Did you know they're developing biodegradable caskets with built-in memorial webcams? I chewed mechanically, nodding the new perfume, something French and expensive that I hadn't bought. The silk scarf around her neck, despite the warm evening. Classic concealment tactics. You two chat often, I observed, keeping my tone neutral as Switzerland. Well, he's just so passionate about the business, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Says if you land the Maplewood contract, everything changes. Imagine the possibilities. Money, possibilities. The things Caroline always felt she'd been cheated out of by marrying a government grunt with more medals than stock options. I stayed quiet. Years of interrogation resistance training taught me that silence was often more powerful than questions. People hate conversational vacuums. They'll fill them with truth if you wait long enough. But I didn't need a confession. The evidence was written in her body language, her sudden interests, and the way she now said Alexander like it was a prayer to a more responsive God. My wife was having an affair with our funeral director. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd survived 3 wars only to watch my marriage die in a mortuary. Time to expand surveillance. In special ops, we called it pattern of life analysis. Watching, documenting, building a complete operational picture before executing the mission. And I was very good at my job. 4. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to present the future of eternal rest, the revolutionary Everlast 3000. Alexander stood beside a casket that looked like someone had asked NASA to design a coffin. Mirror-polished composite shell, ambient LED lighting, enough touch panels to launch a shuttle. We'd all been summoned for the presentation. Wayne nervous but excited, Martha the accountant squinting suspiciously, 2 young assistants gawking like kids at a magic show. This masterpiece of mortuary innovation features biometric security, responding only to authorized personnel, climate control for optimal preservation, and military-grade acoustic insulation. He caressed the surface like a game show host fondling a new car. Complete sound isolation, essential for our premium clients who value privacy even in death. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. Including screams, I thought. Perfect soundproofing works both ways. The interior features our patented cloud comfort technology that adapts to body contours, like sleeping on air, if air cost $20,000. He popped the lid with theatrical flair, revealing an interior that belonged in a luxury hotel, not a cemetery. Tom, would you mind helping demonstrate? Your military bearing would perfectly showcase the ergonomics. Show the Maplewood clients that even a genuine American hero finds it comfortable. Uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the group. Wayne gave me his "do it for the business" look. Sure, I shrugged and approached the casket. The interior was surprisingly comfortable. The fabric molded to my body like those high-tech sleeping systems we tested but never received in the field. I lay there looking up at curious faces hovering over the open casket. The situation was absurd enough to be almost funny. "How's it feel?" Alexander asked. "Better than some forward operating bases I've slept in," I admitted. "Perfect," Alexander beamed. "Now let's demonstrate the automatic closure and biometric security." I climbed out as he touched the side panel. The lid glided shut with a hydraulic whisper. "System armed," he announced. "Now only authorized fingerprints or the emergency override can open it. We'll program access for all staff naturally." He swiped his finger across the scanner. The lid opened smoothly. "This is the future of the funeral industry, people," he concluded. "We'll be the first in the region offering this exclusive service. Imagine the impression on our first Maplewood client." After the demo, while everyone dispersed, I lingered, studying the casket. Something about it triggered my threat assessment instincts. Maybe it was the soldier's awareness that any container that locks can become a cage. I leaned in, examining the control panel. Complex system for a corpse container. Biometric locks belonged on weapons vaults and classified servers, not coffins. Something wasn't adding up. Like a scope that's slightly off, you might not notice until you squeeze the trigger and miss by a mile. 5. Everything changed the Thursday night. I found Caroline's forgotten phone. We were closing up. I went to grab my jacket from the break room and spotted the familiar rose gold case on the table. Caroline had been in earlier with another of her untouched lunch deliveries. The phone buzzed, screen lit up, message preview from AC appeared. "Meeting tonight 10 p.m. at mortuary. Don't be late. Final preparations for tomorrow's special delivery. This is our moment." My gut clenched like I just spotted a tripwire. 2 decades of threat assessment screamed that this was more than adultery. I'd memorized her passcode years ago, her first acting credit date, because of course it was. I unlocked the phone. The message thread with Alexander was a roadmap of betrayal. Texts, photos, the predictable digital trail of an affair. But buried in the romance were references to a special arrangement and golden opportunity involving Maplewood millionaire. "This job fixes everything," Alexander had written. "We can disappear together." "What about T?" Caroline had asked. "He won't even notice you're gone. Guys like him are too lost in their war stories to see what's right in front of them." "T, that's me. Tom, the expendable variable in their equation." I carefully placed the phone back where I'd found it. The hollow feeling wasn't jealousy or rage, more like confirmation of intel. Like when you finally spot the sniper's nest you've been sensing all day. Our marriage had been KIA for years. Now I had the death certificate. But questions remained. What special arrangement? How did their affair connect to a millionaire's funeral? Why meet at a locked mortuary at 10 p.m.? I decided to conduct surveillance, basic reconnaissance. I needed intel on whatever operation they were running that could compromise Wayne's business. I drove home, changed into dark clothes, waited for Caroline to announce she was visiting her sister, then followed at a textbook distance. Predictably, she headed straight to the mortuary. I didn't take my phone, left it charging at home like we'd been trained. Modern smartphones are voluntary tracking devices, and I didn't need digital breadcrumbs. The plan was simple: infiltrate through the rear entrance. I had keys. Observe without detection, gather intelligence, exfiltrate clean. Basic recon. Nothing I hadn't done 100 times in hostile territory. I should have known the most dangerous operations are the ones in your own backyard. 6. The funeral home transformed after dark from a palace of peaceful farewells to something from a midnight horror show. Shadows turned flower arrangements into crouching demons. Emergency lighting became interrogation lamps. Death dropped its daytime makeup and showed its real face. I slipped through the rear door using my keys. Inside felt like infiltrating an enemy compound. Same heightened senses, same controlled breathing, same muscle memory guiding every step. Years of training made silence automatic. I approached the main viewing room where we demonstrated the Everlast 3000. Light leaked under the door. Voices carried. Alexander and Caroline, masks off. "You're sure this will work?" Caroline's voice, equal parts nervous and excited. "Absolutely," Alexander's confident purr. "My contact with the widow is rock solid. She'll pay $500,000 cash to swap the caskets, $500,000 for a few hours' work." "But why does she want a different casket?" "Who gives a shit?" Alexander laughed. "Something about her husband's will requiring specific burial conditions. Rich people and their control games. Point is, she wants the Everlast instead of the torture device hubby ordered for her." I crept closer, using doorframe shadows for concealment. They stood by the demonstration casket. Alexander had his arm around Caroline's waist. Her head rested on his shoulder. A couple planning their future on the bones of the present. "When we get the money," Alexander continued, stroking her hair, "we disappear. Bahamas, Fiji. Name your paradise where your soldier boy will never find us." "What about Wayne?" Caroline asked. "Fuck him, he'll blame me for embezzlement, throw a fit, curse the day he hired me. By the time he notices you're gone too, we'll be ghosts with new names." He leaned down and kissed her. Caroline responded with passion I hadn't seen in years. "What about Tom?" she asked, pulling away. "He's not the type to just accept things." Alexander smirked. "Tom, he won't even notice you're gone. Guys like him are married to their nightmares, not their wives. He's probably more comfortable with his dead bodies than living people." I felt the sting, not of jealousy but of recognition. Maybe he was right. Maybe I'd never really come home from the desert. Caroline sighed with a bitterness I'd never heard before. "You know, sometimes I felt like a war widow even while he was deployed. Every tour took another piece of him. By the end, I was married to a ghost who happened to breathe." Her words carried genuine pain beneath the betrayal. Maybe I wasn't the only casualty of my service. I shifted for a better view and knocked over a vase. It toppled forward, shattering on the floor like a grenade. "What the hell?" Alexander tensed. Their footsteps approached fast. I quickly scanned for exits. Main door blocked. Service corridor behind me led to loading dock. Side door opened to prep room. Multiple escape routes, but all required exposure. "Someone's here," Caroline gasped. Instinct overrode logic. The only hiding spot was the Everlast 3000, lid invitingly open like a high-tech mouth. I slipped inside and pulled the lid down, leaving a crack for observation. Alexander and Caroline rushed into the room, searching. "Nobody," he said, scanning the space. "Probably just the building settling. These old places have more creaks than a retirement home." "I swear I heard something," Caroline pressed against him, "like someone was watching us." "You're paranoid," Alexander checked the room again. "Your husband's probably home dreaming about dead terrorists. Stop worrying." They returned to the viewing room. I prepared to exit once they were distracted, but then Alexander spoke about the casket. "Speaking of our golden ticket," he patted the Everlast's lid, my hiding spot. Tomorrow we load it for the Maplewood delivery. Everything's arranged. Let's seal it up, he said confidently. Keep it pristine for our payday. My heart stopped. I positioned myself to spring out, but too late. The lid closed with that pneumatic whisper, triggering the biometric lock. I pressed against the lid from inside, solid as a bank vault. The military-grade soundproofing Alexander had bragged about worked perfectly. My shouts might as well have been thoughts. I hammered the lid, creating vibrations they had to notice. Useless. They were already leaving, voices fatting. "See you at 9 tomorrow," Alexander said. "Big day ahead." I tried every surface that might hide a release. Nothing. Attempted various codes on what felt like a keypad. All failed. The implications hit like a rifle butt to the skull. Tomorrow this casket, with me inside, would travel to Maplewood Estates for a millionaire's funeral. The trap had sprung. The hunter had become the hunted, and my high-tech cage was about to go mobile. Chapter 2. Into the Millionaire's Tomb. Death has a sense of humor darker than a midnight ocean. Sometimes it whispers jokes only corpses understand. Sometimes it sets up punchlines that take years to deliver. And sometimes, like now, it locks you in a box and says, "Let's see how you laugh your way out of this one, soldier boy." My name is Tom McBride, and I was about to learn that rich people's funerals have their own special kind of hell. 1. The mortuary morning shift starts with the reliability of a military reveille. The sounds of purposeful footsteps woke me from fitful half-sleep in my luxury prison. I heard the back door opening, multiple voices entering. The everlast 3000 lived up to its promise. Everything outside reached me muffled and distant, like listening to the world through a pillow soaked in formaldehyde. "Watch that corner, Billy," Alexander's irritated voice cut through. "This is German engineering, not your uncle's pickup truck." "Sorry, Mr. Croft," mumbled an unfamiliar voice, apparently Billy the hapless. I felt the casket tilt as they began the loading process. My hands involuntarily clenched. The journey into whatever nightmare awaited was beginning. "Help!" I roared with every ounce of air my Marine-trained lungs could muster. "I'm in here. For the love of God, help!" Useless. The soundproofing turned my screams into whispers that even the dead would strain to hear. I could detonate a grenade in here, and they'd probably think it was the air conditioning kicking on. "Ready to roll," Billy announced. "This thing weighs more than my ex-wife's resentment." "Of course it does," Alexander scoffed. "German engineering doesn't do things halfway. 2 men should handle it easily if they're not completely incompetent." The hearse engine purred to life. I was now cargo, destination unknown, though I had a pretty good idea which millionaire's estate was about to get an unexpected delivery. In total darkness, I activated my internal clock, a skill beaten into every Force Recon Marine until it became instinct. 15 seconds to assess situation and resources. No more, no less. Situation: trapped in an airtight container. No external communication. Heading to a millionaire's funeral. Self-rescue probability somewhere between slim and snowball in hell. Resources: clothing, folding knife, my everyday carry Benchmade auto, never left home without it. Watch with tritium dial, empty pockets, and rapidly depleting sanity. I systematically explored the casket's interior with my blade. My fingers found a ridged panel near the head, felt like a small ventilation grate. I worked the knife's edge around it, feeling the section give slightly. Bingo. Working carefully, no point surviving 3 wars to die of stupidity, I enlarged the opening. Cool air trickled through, bringing blessed oxygen. Small victory, but in situations like this, you collect them like coins. Next, I created an observation port. I delicately cut through the lining fabric near my head, making a hole just big enough to see through but invisible from outside. Through this improvised periscope, I glimpsed the hearse ceiling and occasionally, tree tops rolling past like a forest of upside-down crosses. I caught myself appreciating the cosmic joke. A man who'd survived the world's deadliest places was now riding to his own funeral, watching the world through a hole in a coffin. If my squad could see me now, they'd die laughing, then probably come back as ghosts just to laugh some more. 2. The hearse slowed and stopped. Through my peephole, I first saw ornate iron gates with gilded initials, EB, then caught glimpses of a mansion that made Versailles look like a trailer park. "Welcome to the Bateswood estate, Mr. Croft," announced a voice so British it probably bled tea. "Thank you, Hutchinson," Alexander replied with artificial warmth thick as funeral makeup. "We've brought the casket for Mrs. Bateswood as arranged." "Follow me, sir. The family has assembled in the main hall for the viewing." They lifted me from the hearse and carried me inside. Through my observation slit, I watched crystal chandeliers pass overhead like frozen fireworks, antique furniture that belonged in museums, and ceiling moldings that probably cost more than most people's houses. When they set the casket down, I heard the buzz of conversation, at least 24 voices, all speaking in the hushed tones of people pretending to grieve while mentally calculating their inheritance. "This is absolutely unconscionable," declared a sharp male voice. "I've been his attorney for 28 years. 28 years. And what do I get? A pocket watch and a painting that's probably fake." "Shut your mouth, Howard," replied a woman's voice, whiskey rough and bitter. "You whine like a colicky baby. At least you didn't have to sleep with him. Twice married, twice divorced, twice screwed in every sense." They moved the casket again, positioning me center stage. Voices grew louder, like vultures arguing over the choicest bits. "So this is Father's final selection," said a younger male voice. "Leave it to Edward to insist on the most advanced casket money can buy." "It's the latest model from Eternal Rest Incorporated," Alexander interjected with his salesman's polish. "Mr. Bateswood selected it personally before his passing." "Typical," snorted a young woman. "Even dead, Daddy needs the newest toys, like he's going to check his stock portfolio from the grave." "But this is barbaric," exploded another voice, presumably one of the sons. "Locking her in the mausoleum overnight with Father's corpse, even for Edward, this is beyond the pale." Silence fell like a hammer before a commanding female voice cut through. "If Isabella wants her millions, she can endure one night. We endured his eccentricities for decades. This is just his final performance." The puzzle pieces clicked with an almost audible snap. Edward Bateswood, the eccentric millionaire, had apparently left a bizarre codicil in his will. His young widow must spend the night locked in the family mausoleum beside his corpse to inherit, in a second casket. The situation was becoming clearer and exponentially worse. 3. They moved the casket again. The acoustics changed, suggesting a smaller, cooler space. A door closed and I heard approaching footsteps, light, with the distinctive click of expensive heels on marble. "Is this the correct casket?" A woman's voice, soft and melodic, nothing like Caroline's sharp tones. "Yes, Mrs. Bateswood," Alexander confirmed. "The Everlast 3000 latest model. Climate control, automatic closure, perfect soundproofing." So this was Isabella, the young widow who'd inherit millions if she survived a night with her dead husband. "May I look inside?" she asked. I tensed. This was endgame. They'd open the lid and find an ex-Marine instead of a millionaire. "Unfortunately, no." Alexander's smooth voice carried professional regret. "The casket was sealed per Mr. Bateswood's specific instructions. He wanted it opened only during the formal ceremony. You'll need to enter your own casket later, in the mausoleum." "I understand," Isabella sighed. "Edward always controlled every detail. Even his own funeral had to be perfectly orchestrated." She moved closer. I heard fabric rustling, silk against silk. "Mr. Croft, I need to discuss a delicate matter." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You know about my husband's peculiar requirement." Yes, Mrs. Bateswood. You must spend the night in the family mausoleum in a separate casket beside your late husband. Exactly. But the casket Edward chose for me is ancient, cramped, with a wooden headrest. It's practically medieval torture. Edward knew I suffered from claustrophobia. He probably expected me to break before dawn. I heard her packing, nervous energy seeking an outlet. You see, I'm willing to fulfill his final wishes, truly, but not in that chamber of horrors. I won't survive the night in that thing. I understand your concerns, Alexander sympathized. That's why you contacted me. A pause heavy with implication. Yes, precisely. Her voice became silk over steel. You've brought two caskets, one for Edward, this magnificent specimen, and a demonstration model identical for the family viewing. Yes, but what if, she paused for effect, we switched the torture chamber Edward intended for me with your comfortable demonstration model? No one would notice. They all expect me to suffer, but I'll spend the night in relative comfort. I could practically hear the gears in Alexander's head spinning like a slot machine hitting jackpot. Mrs. Bateswood, you know we already discussed the price over the phone. $500,000, she finished, cash today. I lay there, stunned by the naked capitalism of it all. Alexander was running a triple con, selling the family a casket for the millionaire, switching the widow's assigned casket for the demo model, and pocketing $500,000 in the process. One question remained. What happened when I finally escaped this designer tomb? 4. Once Isabella left, I redoubled my escape efforts with the desperate efficiency of a trapped animal. Military training covered survival in captivity, but escaping from a luxury German casket hadn't made the curriculum at Quantico. Feeling along the lid's interior in the darkness, I discovered a small panel near the ventilation system. My fingers traced what felt like Braille instructions, an interesting design choice for a coffin. My rusty Braille skills from that North Korean operation finally found a use. I made out several digits, emergency unlock code, 6 digits total. Without light, reading the complete sequence was like trying to read a book underwater at midnight. I began methodically testing combinations, pressing the barely perceptible buttons on the panel. 123,456. Nothing. 0. Silence. 111,111. The void mocked my efforts. The door opened again, and I heard a voice that made my blood crystallize. So everything's set. Caroline, my wife, my betrayer. Almost gorgeous, Alexander answered. Isabella just left, agreed to the full $500K cash on delivery. 500,000. Caroline's voice carried the reverence usually reserved for religious experiences. You're brilliant, Alex. Alex, Christ on a cracker. 23 years of marriage and she'd never once used a pet name. I was always just Tom or occasionally Thomas when she was pissed. Fabric rustled. I pictured them embracing. The wet sound of kissing confirmed my mental image with nauseating clarity. Actually, Alexander's voice turned predatory. We have time before the ceremony. This casket's so sturdy we could really test its structural integrity. No, I thought desperately. Please, God, if you have any mercy left in your cosmic joke book, not on top of the casket where I'm trapped. But the universe, having established its twisted sense of humor, wasn't done with me. I felt the casket shake slightly as weight settled on top. The sounds that followed needed no interpretation. They were writing their own chapter in the Kama Sutra while I lay beneath them like the world's most uncomfortable mattress. This was a new circle of hell. Dante missed this one entirely. Lying in complete darkness, buried alive, listening to my wife make love to another man literally on top of my prison. Even my nightmares weren't this creative. I focused on the keypad with the intensity of a bomb technician on his first day. Under these circumstances, even PTSD flashbacks seemed preferable. 654,321. Nothing. 112,233. No result. When the gymnastics above finally ceased, I graduated to 999,999. Still nothing. That was intense, Caroline panted. Wait till we're on our yacht, Alexander laughed. Now let's go, ceremony starts soon. They left, and I continued cycling through combinations with the determination of a man who had nothing left to lose. Because I didn't. 5. They moved the casket again. The acoustic changes suggested a large hall with vaulted ceilings. Voices multiplied, easily 36 people now. The Bateswood family circus was reaching its grand finale. Ladies and gentlemen, a deep voice announced, must be the eldest son. Before we begin the formal ceremony, I'll read the relevant sections of our father's will regarding today's unusual arrangements. The kind of silence that costs money descended on the room. Section 23, he continued. I, Edward Cornelius Bateswood, being of questionably sound mind and unquestionably vindictive spirit, bequeath the bulk of my estate, including my shares in Bateswood Industries, the Aspen Compound, the Tuscany Vineyard, and my collection of vintage motorcycles, to my fifth and final wife, Isabella Marie Bateswood, contingent upon. Dramatic pause. Her spending one full night in the family mausoleum in a casket placed beside my own, from the moment of sunset following the funeral ceremony until 9 a.m. the following morning. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through a graveyard. Silence, the reader demanded. Should this condition not be fulfilled to the letter, all assets designated for her will be divided equally among my children from previous marriages. We all know the damn terms, Daniel, interrupted a cold female voice. No need to perform Shakespeare. Protocol requires it, Margaret, Daniel replied stiffly, as does the presence of all heirs at the ceremony. Where's Patricia? Here, here, slurred a female voice. Just needed a little liquid courage from the powder room. Liquid courage by the quart, judging by the smell, someone muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Bite me, Margaret, Patricia snapped back. Not all of us perfected the art of being an ice sculpture. Some of us still have actual feelings. And some of us still have livers, Margaret countered. Edward always said you'd pickle yourself before 50. Another winning bet for him. Ladies, please, interjected a younger female voice dripping sarcasm. Let's at least pretend this is a funeral, not a cage match. Don't start, Sophia, Daniel warned. What, dear brother, she responded. Isn't this what Daddy wanted? One last puppet show with him pulling strings from beyond. He's probably watching us right now, laughing his ass off. I almost heard her gesturing toward my temporary sarcophagus. Sophia, several voices protested. Fine, whatever, she said insincerely. Where's the grieving widow anyway? Shouldn't she be center stage for this farce? Isabella's preparing, Daniel answered. This ordeal isn't easy for her. Oh, I'm sure she'll manage, Sophia drawled. Amazing what people endure when hundreds of millions are at stake. Right then, Isabella entered. I could tell by the sudden hush followed by the whisper of expensive fabric and designer heels on marble. Forgive my delay, she said in a trembling voice. I needed time to prepare myself emotionally. Her acting deserved an Oscar, but my years of interrogation experience made me fluent in the language of deception. Of course, dear, Daniel's voice softened. We understand what you're facing. Thank you, Isabella sniffled. Edward was everything to me. I'm ready to honor his final wish, however unusual it might be. Naturally, Margaret commented dryly, especially considering the prize for your endurance. The ceremony will begin in 1 hour, Daniel announced, ignoring the barb. Then the procession will descend to the family mausoleum where you'll spend the night as required. I'm prepared, Isabella replied with manufactured courage. At that moment, I realized I was trapped in something far stranger and more complex than a simple marital betrayal. I'd become an unwitting actor in a millionaire's posthumous revenge play, and judging by the family dynamics, the night was just getting started. Six. Ready? I heard Alexander whisper. Most of the crowd had apparently left the hall. Yeah, boss, Billy replied. You sure nobody'll notice the switch? These rich pricks, Alexander chuckled. They won't even glance at Isabella's casket. They're too busy hopping she'll crack so they can split the inheritance. I felt my casket being repositioned. They were preparing the switch. The old man's really in that other one, Billy asked. Yeah, Alexander confirmed. Body was transferred this morning. He'll rest peacefully as corpses do. Peacefully seemed optimistic, I thought, already planning my dramatic entrance once I escaped. And we put this one down for the widow. Right into the mausoleum, the medieval torture device that Bateswood specifically chose for his wife. We conveniently lose it. She's really paying $500,000 for comfort. Already paid, Alexander chuckled, presumably patting his pocket. Cash in hand, rich people and their money soon parted. Panic I'd been suppressing started rising like tide water. If they installed the demo casket in the mausoleum with me inside, I'd be trapped underground all night. No escape routes, no hope of rescue. Or worse, if Isabella opened the casket expecting emptiness and found me instead, she might die of fright. Or more likely, assume I was a grave robber and have security shoot first, ask questions never. I renewed my escape attempts with desperate precision, first methodically, then frantically. I pounded the lid with my fists, kicked the sides, even tried sawing through the lining with my knife. All useless. The Everlast 3000 lived up to its name, practically indestructible from inside. I heard approaching voices, many voices. The ceremony was beginning. In one last desperate effort, I gathered all my strength and began rhythmically pounding the lid in Morse code. SOS. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Over and over. To my amazement, the sound penetrated enough to be heard. What's that? Someone exclaimed. The casket, it's moving, another voice cried. Dear God, came a terrified whisper. Must be some mechanism, suggested a third voice. Part of the high-tech features. No, that's not mechanical, someone disagreed. It's Morse code, someone signaling SOS. The room erupted into chaos. People screaming, praying, demanding explanations. Continue the ceremony, Daniel commanded with forced authority. Father always loved theatrical gestures. This is probably his last joke. I heard footsteps approach and felt someone lean on the casket. What the hell is happening? Alexander hissed. Maybe it's the millionaire's ghost, Caroline suggested nervously. He's objecting to the switch, protecting his young bride. Don't be ridiculous, Alexander snapped. More likely a malfunction in the automatic systems, or, hell, I don't know, just smile and pretend it's planned. The minister uncertainly continued the service, occasionally stumbling when I renewed my desperate percussion. The assembled guests had apparently decided this was part of Bateswood's eccentric farewell, a final dramatic gesture from beyond the grave. See, someone said, even after death, Edward's making his presence known, a true Bateswood to the end. And I, trapped inside this technological coffin, continued my futile attempts at rescue, unaware that the most interesting part of this nightmare hadn't even started yet. Chapter 3: The Mausoleum Nights. Death teaches you things they don't put in field manuals, like how silence can scream louder than artillery, like how darkness has textures, velvet smooth or razor sharp depending on what's hunting you, like how being buried alive isn't the worst thing that can happen to you. Sometimes the worst thing is what happens after they dig you up. My name is Tom McBride, and I was about to get a master class in things worse than death. 1. We now begin the procession to the family mausoleum. the minister announced in his best funeral voice, the one that probably cost extra. My temporary steel womb swayed as 6 pallbearers hoisted me up. I felt the movement, smooth and deliberate, matching the funeral march that someone had probably downloaded from iTunes. Through my improvised peephole, I watched ceiling lights flicker past like dying stars, then stone masonry replaced them. The air grew colder, heavier. We were descending into what rich people called a mausoleum but felt more like designer purgatory. "Watch the turn," Daniel commanded. These stairs were carved when people were shorter and more careful. The pallbearers navigated the casket down a spiral descent that would have made Dante nervous. I felt every turn, every careful step. Temperature dropped like my hopes of a normal evening. Even through the casket walls, I sensed we'd entered a significantly colder space, typical underground crypt, just with better financing. "Place the caskets on the platforms," ordered the same voice when we finally hit bottom. They lowered me onto something solid and unforgiving. Sounds indicated another casket being positioned nearby, presumably containing the actual Edward Bateswood, who at least had the decency to be properly dead for his own funeral. "Ladies and gentlemen," the minister intoned, "we gather here to commit Edward Cornelius Bateswood to his eternal rest. Family members may speak their final words." Brief pause while people remembered they were supposed to care. "Father," Daniel began, his commanding voice developing hairline cracks, "you left behind a complex legacy, demanding, often cruel but never boring. You taught me that sentiment is weakness and weakness is death in the marketplace." He paused, wrestling with something that might have been emotion if it hadn't been strangled at birth. "When you turned 70 and the doctors gave you 6 months, you told me you'd outlive them all just to see the looks on their faces. You almost did. Stubborn bastard to the end." Strange cocktail in his voice, irritation, respect, and something that might have been love if it hadn't been so expensive. He stepped back, and I heard heels clicking on stone like an expensive typewriter. "Edward," came the hoarse female voice, slightly blurred by what sounded like prescription courage. "You destroyed my life systematically and with spreadsheets. Took our son, turned him against me. Patricia's too emotional to raise a Bateswood heir, remember that? Your exact words to the judge. Now you're dead and I'm still here, still talking to you. Who won, Edward?" She laughed, the sound of crystal breaking in slow motion. "The sick joke. I still love you, you calculated son of a bitch. Despite everything, because of everything, you magnificent monster." Patricia retreated, her heels unsteady, replaced by measured surgical footsteps. "Edward," Margaret's voice could have frozen vodka, "you were an exceptional business partner and a catastrophic husband. You built an empire and burned your family for fuel. You were Citizen Kane without the sled." She paused, probably checking her watch. "Still, I'm grateful. You made me harder than you were. After our divorce, I built my own empire and proved your favorite theory wrong, that women are too emotional for real business. Turns out we're just better at hiding the blood." Margaret withdrew, replaced by lighter, almost dancing steps. "Hi, Daddy," Sophia's voice carried unexpected warmth, minus her trademark sarcasm. "Everyone thinks I hated you, probably because I'm the only one who told you exactly what kind of bastard you were, to your face, during Christmas dinner, with witnesses." Shocked gasps rippled through the mausoleum like waves in a very expensive pond. "Oh, please," Sophia snorted. "He loved it, right, Dad? You always said truth was the only currency worth a damn. That's why I loved you despite your tireless efforts to make that impossible. You were a manipulative, controlling, borderline sociopathic tyrant, but you never lied. And you taught me to see through everyone else's bullshit. That's worth something." She paused, and I imagined her surveying the assembled vultures. "That's why I know your final joke has layers, like everything else you did, like a poisoned wedding cake." She delivered that last line like a guided missile, and I could feel its impact on Isabella. Then Sophia departed, her heels playing a victory march on the stone. Silence fell, broken only by what sounded like professionally choreographed sobbing, definitely Isabella's performance piece. I used the moment to assess my tactical situation. So far, the ceremony was proceeding according to the script. 2. We conclude this service, the minister announced after everyone had their say. May Edward find whatever rest the universe deems appropriate, and may his body return to the earth from whence it came, eventually. He offered a prayer that sounded like a legal disclaimer. Time was running like blood from a head wound. Soon they'd lock me in this underground designer vault with Isabella for the entire night. Everyone please return upstairs, Daniel ordered. Isabella will remain to fulfill our father's final requirement. General movement, expensive shoes shuffling on stone, whispers that cost extra, footsteps ascending like a reverse Jacob's ladder. Once most had left, I heard Daniel address Isabella. Remember, the mausoleum doors open in exactly 12 hours. The timer is electronic and non-negotiable. You must remain here all night or forfeit everything. I understand, Isabella replied, her voice soft as a snake's belly. There's an intercom system, Daniel continued, for genuine emergencies only. What constitutes a genuine emergency? Isabella asked, trembling like a tuning fork. What if I have a panic attack? Then you'll receive assistance, Daniel replied evenly, and lose approximately $321 million. The will is specific. Any breach of conditions means you get the standard widow's portion, 7%, while the remainder goes to us. Your choice. With that compassionate send-off, he turned and left. I heard the mausoleum door close with a sound like God clearing his throat. Several seconds of perfect silence, then rapid footsteps, followed by an exhale that could have inflated a life raft. Finally, she said in a completely different voice, confident and sharp as a surgical scalpel. Christ, I thought my face would crack from all that fake crying. My tear ducts feel like I've been peeling onions in a sandstorm. I heard fabric rustling, probably removing her mourning veil. Then her purse opening and the distinctive clink of glass meeting glass. Time to celebrate, Isabella declared. 12 hours in this marble meat locker and I'm richer than most small countries, worth raising a glass, or three. Cork popped like a champagne gunshot. Liquid poured with the sound of money flowing downhill. The grieving widow had brought Dom Perignon to her husband's tomb. Class act. Now for entertainment, she said to herself. Long night ahead. Thank God for unlimited data. I heard her retrieve something electronic. The familiar chime of FaceTime followed. Marcus, it's me, Isabella said. Yes, already in the tomb. Everything's going perfectly. These idiots actually locked me in like I asked. Can you believe their stupidity? She laughed, the sound of ice cracking under weight. By the way, that funeral director did exactly as promised. Swapped my torture chamber for the luxury model. Edward would shit himself if he knew I'll spend the night in comfort instead of the medieval torture device he special ordered. Probably had it imported from some bankrupt Eastern European dungeon. Pause while Marcus responded. Yes, for 500K pocket change compared to tomorrow's payday. Did you verify the exact amount? Another pause. 321 million. Seriously. The old bastard was even richer than my private investigator estimated. I lay there, stunned by the clinical efficiency of her greed. She discussed her recently deceased husband like he was a lottery ticket that finally hit. First thing after the lawyers transfer the money, I'm burning this Gothic monstrosity to the ground, Isabella continued. Then a month in Geneva to process my grief mainly into numbered accounts. Then that private island near Tahiti. You have to come, Marcus. White sand, blue water, no Bateswoods for 1,000 miles. She giggled like a psychotic schoolgirl. Yes, I'm in a mausoleum, but it's not terrible. Climate-controlled, Wi-Fi-enabled, fully stocked bar in the corner. Edward insisted on dying in comfort, even had them install USB outlets. For what? Charging his phone in the afterlife. Her laughter echoed off stone walls, creating harmonics that would have made Bach nervous. I could almost taste the irony condensing around me like poison fog. Here I was, trapped inside a German-engineered casket, listening to a black widow plan her late husband's money's funeral, while my own wife was probably booking flights to nowhere with our funeral director. God clearly had a sense of humor. Too bad it was so fucking dark. 3. My patience finally flatlined. Time to reveal myself before this night spiraled further into whatever circle of hell we'd reached. I began systematically pressuring the lid while trying different combinations on the emergency panel. This created grinding sounds that would have woken the legitimately dead. "What was that?" Isabella asked sharply. "What's happening, Isabella?" Marcus's voice carried through her phone. "Don't know." Her voice shifted from confident to concerned. "Sounds coming from the casket." "Which casket?" her caller asked anxiously. "My casket, you moron, the one I'm supposed to be in," she snapped. "Something like grinding or banging. You think they mixed up the bodies?" I increased my efforts, creating sounds like a machine dying of metal cancer. Plan was simple: frighten her enough to open the mausoleum and call for help. Then I could escape and explain everything to Daniel or the other heirs. Not ideal, but better than spending all night in designer death trap. "Jesus Christ, Marcus, it's moving," Isabella exclaimed. "The casket, it's like vibrating. What kind of sick game is that bastard playing?" "Calm down," Marcus replied. "Probably just settling, or the casket's automatic systems. You said it was high-tech." "Yes, but—" Then something unexpected happened. The mausoleum lights flickered like a dying man's EKG, then flatlined completely. Isabella's phone died simultaneously. I heard her creative profanity as the screen went black. "Marcus, Marcus!" she screamed into digital darkness. Complete blackness swallowed us whole. I heard only Isabella's hyperventilating, and her heels clicking on stone like a frantic Morse code as she stumbled blind. "The intercom," she muttered. "Where's the fucking intercom?" Footsteps, then button clicking, then more profanity. "Hello, Daniel, anyone?" Real panic invaded her voice like enemy troops. "The lights are dead, and something's wrong with Edward's casket." Silence thick as grave dirt. The intercom had apparently joined the electrical strike. "No, no, no," Isabella whimpered. "This can't be happening. Oh God, I'm going to die here. Edward planned this. The sick fuck planned this." I heard her run to the door and pound against it like she was trying to beat death itself. "Let me out. Something's wrong. Please, anyone." Her screams bounced off stone walls, multiplying into a chorus of terror. But obviously no one heard. The mausoleum was too deep, the walls too thick, the living too far away. "This is your doing, isn't it, Edward?" she shrieked, apparently addressing the caskets. "Even dead, you're tormenting me. You knew the lights would fail. You orchestrated this whole sick show." Her anger rapidly morphed into terror as I continued my escape attempts, creating sounds like hell's own percussion section. Oh God," she babbled. "This can't be real. Dead people stay dead. Edward is dead. The doctors confirmed it. I saw the body. I checked for a pulse myself. Twice." Meanwhile, I kept testing possible combinations. If this model followed standard emergency protocols, there should be a universal override. Military contractors loved standardization, usually something simple, memorable under stress. I tried 911,911. Nothing. 999,999. Nada. Then 112,112. International Emergency Code repeated. Click, soft hum like an angel clearing its throat. The lid began its slow ascent. 4. Moving with deliberate slowness, shock and awe works both ways. I pushed the casket lid higher. In the mausoleum's absolute darkness, the sound created maximum psychological impact. Isabella froze like a deer in an 18-wheeler's headlights. What's happening? Her voice shattered into pieces. The lid continued rising with hydraulic inevitability. Edward, she whispered, this is impossible, you're dead. I made sure, you can't. Oh my fucking God. In complete darkness, she could only see the nightmare silhouette of a casket lid rising like Judgment Day in slow motion. For her, this was every horror movie coming true simultaneously, her murdered husband rising for Old Testament vengeance. The lid opened fully. I sat up slowly, savoring the moment like expensive whiskey. Not that I wanted to literally scare her to death, but some payback for my hours of luxury imprisonment seemed fair. Call it interest on a bad loan. Isabella unleashed a scream that could have shattered crystal in 3 states. She bolted to the door and began hammering with desperate violence. Help, let me out, he's alive. Edward's alive and he wants revenge. Please, somebody, anybody, help me. Her hysteria was so genuine I almost felt guilty. Almost. But guilt, like sympathy, was a luxury I couldn't afford right now. I swear, Edward, I didn't mean for you to die, she screamed between frantic pounding. It was Marcus's idea. He said if we gradually increased your blood pressure medication, it would look like natural causes. I just wanted freedom. And money, yes, but mostly freedom from your disgusting hands and your sick games and your constant testing. Bingo, unexpected confession. Apparently the grieving widow wasn't just a gold digger. She was a black widow who'd helped her spider mate shuffle off this mortal coil. The situation had just shifted from farce to felony. Please, Edward, she sobbed. Don't take me with you. I'm only 28. I have my whole life ahead. I did try to make you happy, even though you revolted me. Even though every night with you felt like prostitution with a corpse. Time to end this performance. I climbed out of the casket, muscles screaming from hours of confinement, and pulled my keychain lead from my pocket. Old habits from the core. Never go anywhere without light, water, and a way to make someone bleed. I'm not a ghost, I announced clearly, clicking on the light. The beam cut through darkness like truth through political promises, illuminating Isabella's face. Her expression morphed from terror through shock to confusion, with brief stops at rage and calculation. Who are you? She pressed against the wall like she was trying to phase through solid stone. What are you doing in my husband's casket? Backing further, she caught her Louboutin heel on the floor's ancient stonework and tore her designer morning dress from hem to thigh. My flashlight revealed La Perla lingerie underneath, black lace that probably cost more than most funerals. Clearly not standard widow's weeds. The old bastard had known how to shop for wives, at least. Name's Tom McBride, I replied, keeping my voice steady as a sniper's aim. I work at the funeral home. There's been a complication. Complication? She stared like I'd spoken ancient Sumerian. What kind of complication? Where's Edward? Your husband should be in the other casket, I explained, directing the beam toward the neighboring platform. I accidentally got locked in the Everlast 3000 demonstration model, the same one Alexander sold you for $500,000. That's impossible, she breathed. I arranged with Alexander, he promised. Alexander and my wife Caroline decided to supplement their income, I said dryly. Creative financing at its finest. Isabella stared at me like I'd announced I was from Mars. Her eyes showed white all around the irises, lips trembling like autumn leaves. In her torn designer dress with smeared makeup and hair like she'd been electrocuted, she looked simultaneously tragic and comic. Lady Macbeth meets Lucy Ricardo. So, Edward is really dead? She finally asked. Far as I know, yes, I nodded. And based on your conversation with Marcus, you helped arrange that. Something about gradually increasing his blood pressure meds. She paled like someone had drained her with a syringe. "You heard that?" "Every word," I confirmed, "including the confession. That's murder, you know, even when it's slow release." "You can't prove anything," she said quickly, calculation replacing fear like a mask snapping into place. "Your word against mine. Who'll believe a man who crashes funerals by hiding in caskets?" "Not like I climbed involuntarily," I clarified. "But you're right, it's a complicated situation." I stepped toward her. She instinctively recoiled like I was radioactive. "But here's what's interesting, Mrs. Bateswood. You just confessed to murder, and we're locked here until morning. Plenty of time to discuss our mutual predicament." 5. At that moment, a sound cut through the mausoleum silence, something like scratching, but wrong somehow. We both froze like recruits hearing their first incoming mortar. "What's that?" Isabella whispered. The sound repeated, louder this time. It came from the second casket, the one allegedly containing the genuinely dead Edward Bateswood. "Now that's properly weird," I exhaled, suddenly doubting everything. "That should be your legitimately deceased husband." "He can't be alive." Isabella's panic ratcheted up to 11. "I checked the body myself. No pulse. The coroner signed the death certificate. I saw them embalm him." We cautiously approached the casket like it might explode. The scratching intensified, taking on an almost rhythmic quality. I aimed the flashlight at the lid. It was slightly ajar, apparently not properly sealed, or something had prevented the latch from engaging fully. "We need to check," I said, though the thought of meeting an actual corpse face to face wasn't on my bucket list. "Are you insane?" Isabella hissed. "What if it really is him? What if he's been alive this whole time waiting, planning? Oh God, what if this is all part of some sick game?" "You said he's definitely dead," I reminded her. "Besides, if your husband somehow survived the embalming process, that would be a medical miracle worth investigating." She gave me a look of pure hatred mixed with terror, quite an achievement. I carefully reached for the lid, intending to open it fully. At that moment, something unexpected happened. The lid jerked violently, and something black and furry launched out like a missile made of midnight. Isabella screamed loud enough to wake everyone in the cemetery above us. I instinctively jumped back, dropping the flashlight. The beam went wild, strobing across stone walls, Isabella's terrified face, and an enormous black cat with eyes like green fire. "It's just a cat," Isabella said when her brain finally processed what her eyes were seeing. "Apparently," I replied, studying our unexpected visitor. The cat was massive, with fur that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It sat perfectly still on the casket's edge, like this was its natural throne, observing us with an intelligence that made me nervous. "How the hell did it get in there?" Isabella asked. "Probably climbed in before they sealed the casket," I theorized. "Cats like confined spaces. Or maybe it lives in the cemetery and found a way into the mausoleum through some maintenance shaft." As if understanding our discussion, the cat suddenly leaped down with liquid grace and darted to the mausoleum's far corner. Isabella and I instinctively followed like we'd been summoned. "We should catch it," I said. "Otherwise it'll be running around all night making noise." "Sleep." Isabella looked at me like I'd suggested recreational brain surgery. "You actually plan to sleep in a tomb." "What's our alternative?" I reasoned. "The doors won't open until morning, unless you want to spend 8 hours screaming at stone walls." "No," she said quickly. "If I leave before dawn, I lose everything." "Exactly," I nodded. "So we might as well make the best of our situation. Long night ahead." We began pursuing the cat, which clearly enjoyed this game more than we did. It jumped platform to platform with acrobatic precision, slid under caskets like liquid shadow, scaled wall carvings like they were designed for climbing. During the chase, Isabella and I repeatedly collided in the darkness, ending up in positions that would have been comic if they weren't so awkward. Once, when we both dove for the cat under an empty platform, she ended up sprawled across my lap. "Is your hand where I think it is, mister?" she asked with icy dignity. "MacBride, Tom MacBride. And no, that's the cat's tail," I replied, trying to maintain some shred of professionalism. After several failed attempts that left us both winded and disheveled, we finally cornered the cat between Edward's casket and the mausoleum's north wall. I reached to grab it, but at that moment, a familiar sound emanated from the casket, the distinctive vibration of a cell phone. We both froze like we'd heard a ghost clearing its throat. "Is that," I started. "A phone," Isabella confirmed, unexpectedly calm. "Edward insisted on being buried with his iPhone, said he wanted to day trade from the afterlife. I thought it was another one of his sick jokes." I couldn't tell if she was serious or developing a sense of humor about her situation. "And it actually works?" I asked, nodding toward the still vibrating casket. "Apparently," Isabella shrugged. "Edward only bought top-tier tech. That phone has a battery that could power a small city, probably nuclear." The vibration continued, insistent as a debt collector. "We should investigate," I said decisively. "You want to open my husband's actual casket?" Isabella looked at me like I'd suggested grave robbing, which, technically, I had. "Got any better ideas for killing time until dawn?" I asked. "Besides, you're not exactly reverent toward your late husband. I heard your confession, remember?" She pursed her lips but couldn't argue with the logic. "Fine," she agreed reluctantly. "Let's see who's calling Edward from the other side. Probably his broker with a hot stock tip." We carefully approached the casket to investigate the sound source. The phone kept vibrating with mechanical persistence, as if the caller knew we were listening and refused to give up. The night was young, and apparently so were the surprises waiting in Edward Bateswood's casket. Chapter 4: Edward's Final Performance. Life's a comedy written by a sadist. Death's the punchline nobody gets until it's too late to laugh. And sometimes, just sometimes, you find yourself trapped between the two, playing straight man in a cosmic joke you don't understand. My name is Tom MacBride, and I was about to discover that even death has an encore. 1. The phone's vibration didn't stop. It filled the mausoleum like invisible insects, the sound bouncing off stone walls until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. The cat, apparently deciding we'd been sufficiently distracted, used the moment to vanish again into the shadows. I was starting to think it was less feline and more supernatural overseer. "Well," I looked at Isabella, "should we answer the call from beyond?" She nodded, biting her lip hard enough to draw blood. I carefully lifted the casket lid. It opened easily, too easily, like it had been waiting. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness to reveal Edward Bateswood's face. Even in death, he looked like a man who'd foreclosed on orphanages for fun. Silver hair styled with mathematical precision, suit that probably cost more than my annual salary, expression of vague disappointment like the world had failed to meet his specifications. In his folded hands, positioned with funeral home perfection, lay the latest iPhone, its screen casting corpse light on his face. "That's unsettling," I muttered. "Edward never cared about unsettling people," Isabella replied, peering into the casket with the expression of someone expecting a jack-in-the-box with teeth. "He fed on discomfort like other people breathe air." Her voice carried no grief, no fear, just the weary annoyance of someone dealing with a problematic appliance that refused to stay broken. The phone kept vibrating. The screen showed a notification that made my blood crystallize. "Live stream ready. Auto starts in 10 seconds. "What live stream?" I frowned. Isabella cautiously reached for the phone, her fingers trembling like leaves in a storm. "Knowing Edward, something that makes hell look like day care." At that moment I noticed something peripheral but wrong. My flashlight beam caught a reflection, tiny, precise, predatory. I swept the light across the wall and found it, a small camera lens embedded between ancient stones like a glass eye. I moved the beam. Another lens. Another. Another. Son of a bitch, I breathed. We're on camera. I circled the room, flashlight revealing the truth. Cameras everywhere, built into walls, ceiling, even decorating the carved angels that watched over the dead. We weren't in a mausoleum. We were on a stage. Of course, Isabella sighed, sinking onto a stone bench like someone had cut her strings. Edward loved watching people under pressure, said it was the only way to see someone's true face. This is exactly his style, his final show, and we're the stars. The phone chimed, a sound like angels gargling, and displayed a new message. Isabella flinched like she'd been slapped. There's a video file and a note. She opened the message app. I moved closer to read over her shoulder. Dearest Isabella, if you're reading this, the show has already begun. Welcome to Last Night with a Corpse, my posthumous gift to the world of entertainment. You always said I was too suspicious, too cynical, that I couldn't trust anyone. Well, here's your chance to prove me wrong. Show the world you loved me for me, not my money. Spend this night with dignity like a proper widow. P.S. Don't try to leave. It's all part of the show and you'll lose everything. But you already knew that, didn't you? With love, or whatever you called it, Edward. Isabella and I exchanged looks like prisoners recognizing each other in the exercise yard. Your husband was a unique individual, I observed. You have no idea, she muttered, continuing to examine the phone. Oh God, there's more. Another note in the casket lining. She extracted a cream-colored envelope, hidden beneath silk like a viper under a pillow. Inside, a key card and another message in Edward's precise handwriting. This key opens the emergency alcove in the southeast corner. Behind it, emergency supplies, medical kit, food, water, and a satellite phone. If you're genuinely in distress, use it. If you're faking, and we both know you're always faking something, try to resist. Every action is recorded. Every choice has consequences. Remember, I'm still watching. Lee. Isabella laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Even dead, he's still playing puppet master, still testing everyone, still convinced the world's a game and he's the only one who knows the rules. I examined the timer on the phone. 3, 2, 1. Show's starting, I announced. Like it or not, we're going live. 2. The phone screen exploded into life, dividing like a schizophrenic's vision. The main feed showed Isabella and me, lit by my pathetic flashlight. Corner windows displayed multiple angles of the mausoleum. We were covered like a presidential assassination. A viewer counter blinked in the top right. 89,234,567. People are watching. Isabella's voice climbed toward panic. Right now, live. I scanned the space again, mapping camera positions. No blind spots. We were more surveilled than a federal courthouse. Every angle covered, I confirmed. Night vision, thermal imaging, probably audio enhancement. Your husband didn't just plan a show. He built a broadcasting studio disguised as a tomb. The viewer list opened like Pandora's spreadsheet. I whistled through my teeth. Jesus, that's Fortune 500 CEOs, federal judges, foreign diplomats. Your husband had interesting friends. Edward collected powerful people like baseball cards, Isabella explained. He'd host these exclusive gatherings. They'd bet on anything, business failures, political scandals, people's breaking points. Everything was a game if the stakes were high enough. Charming hobby, I noted. For them, it beat golf, she shrugged. When you own everything, you need increasingly exotic entertainment. Edward provided it. I kept scanning the viewer list, then froze like I'd stepped on a mine. Caroline McBride. Your wife, I couldn't process it. How is she? I clicked the name. The screen split again, showing not just us but a hotel room feed. There, on a king bed surrounded by champagne and gilt, sat Caroline and Alexander. Based on their state of undress and general dishevelment, they just finished celebrating their betrayal in the traditional fashion. Oh, Isabella managed, diplomatically looking away. I stared at the screen. 23 years of marriage reduced to a thumbnail video. There was my wife, glowing with post-coital satisfaction, watching my imprisonment like it was Netflix. She looks happy, I observed, surprised by my emotional flatline. Isabella studied me. You're not angry. 22 years hunting America's enemies abroad, I replied. Turns out the real threat was sleeping in my bed the whole time. There's something almost poetic about it. Viewer count climbed like a slot machine. 743, 1266, 2054. Show's getting popular, Isabella noted. What's our play? I looked around. Locked in a tomb until dawn. Cameras recording everything. Hundreds of global elite watching, probably placing bets on our behavior. My wife celebrating my presumed death with her lover. A black cat randomly appearing like some gothic referee. The situation had passed absurd and was approaching transcendent. I say we give them a show, I said, feeling something shift inside me, but not the one they're expecting. 3. Before we could plan our performance, the phone activated chat. Messages flooded in like digital locusts. Daniel Bateswood, what's happening? Who's this man with Isabella? Margaret B. I knew she couldn't last an hour alone. Grandfather always said she was a gold-digging whore. Patricia, can someone explain what's happening? And where's my Xanax? This tomb's spinning. Sophia Bateswood called it. Dad, you magnificent bastard. Even dead, you're still the best showman in town. Real-time family disaster, streaming live. The Bateswoods were watching the mausoleum feed like Romans at the Colosseum. Beautiful, Isabella muttered. They won't even pretend to check if I'm okay, just sitting there eating popcorn and placing bets. Well, it is compelling television, I pointed out. Your late husband created reality TV that makes the Kardashians look like PBS. The screen showing Caroline and Alexander drew my attention again. They were leaning forward, studying their screen with predatory intensity. Holy shit, that's Tom, Caroline exclaimed, pointing. How did he? Her voice came through clear as guilt. She had no idea they were also being broadcast. Fuck, Alexander paled like someone had drained him. This ruins everything. Relax, Caroline waved dismissively. Look at him, pathetic as always, trapped in a coffin like he's trapped in the past. He never understood my needs, never saw me as more than a military wife, some trophy to dust while he played soldier. I absorbed the words like body blows that didn't land. Strange how truth hurts less when you've already bled out. German industrialist. 50k euros says the soldier loses his composure and attacks someone. Dubai prince. 100k says he maintains military discipline. These special forces types are machines. Tokyo empress. 200k says the widow confesses to murder before dawn. The viewers were turning our trauma into a betting pool. Capitalism at its finest. Isabella read the last comment and laughed bitterly. They already know, of course they know. Edward probably left them all notes. One final game, will his widow confess to killing him? Did you? I asked directly. She met my eyes. Yes. Marcus and I increased his blood pressure medication gradually. Took 6 months. Made it look like his heart finally gave up, which it did just with pharmaceutical assistance. That's cold-blooded murder, I observed. That's survival, she corrected. You ever been married to a monster who sees you as an acquisition, who tests your loyalty with increasingly sick games, who makes you do things? She stopped, shuddering. I thought about Caroline, about 23 years of growing distance, about coming home from deployment to find a stranger wearing my wife's face. Maybe we're both killers, I said quietly. You murdered his body. I murdered my marriage through neglect. Different weapons, same result. The chat exploded with reactions. Sophia Bateswood, holy shit, they're bonding over mutual destruction. Dad would love this. Silicon Valley Titan, this is better than anything on HBO. Who owns the rights? Margaret B., I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm actually starting to like Isabella. 4. Instead of breaking down, I felt something crack open inside me. Not breakdown, breakthrough. Like when you finally understand the enemy's strategy and everything shifts. You know what? I said, looking directly into the nearest camera. Caroline's right, I am pathetic. A soldier who couldn't adjust to peace. A husband who brought war home in his head. A man so busy fighting external enemies he never saw the internal ones. Isabella watched me carefully. But here's the thing about war, I continued. It teaches you that sometimes the only way out is through. Sometimes you have to embrace the ambush. I stood up, addressing our invisible audience. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two Killers in a Crypt. Tonight's show features a special forces vet who murdered his marriage and a black widow who literally murdered her husband. We're locked in a designer tomb until dawn, surrounded by cameras while you bet on our breakdowns. But here's a plot twist, we're not breaking down. We're breaking free. Isabella stood beside me, understanding immediately. That's right, she picked up the narrative. You want a confession? Fine. I killed Edward Bateswood, slowly, carefully, with medical precision. Because he was a monster who saw people as game pieces. Because every day with him was psychological torture wrapped in designer clothes. Because I wanted to live, not just survive. And I killed my marriage, I added. Not with pills, but with absence. Not with intention, but with indifference. 23 years of leaving pieces of myself in combat zones until there wasn't enough left to love with. We looked at each other, two confessed killers finding absolution in mutual damnation. The chat went insane. Belgian Duchess, this is the most honest thing I've ever seen. Greek shipping air, they're turning confession into performance art. Andrea Bateswood, okay, I officially love these two. Can we adopt them? Viewer count passed 10,000 and kept climbing. 5. Hours passed like minutes. Isabella and I transformed our captivity into catharsis. We told stories, me about combat zones and the ghosts they create, her about life with a sociopathic billionaire who treated marriage like a psychological experiment. We staged mock game shows. Guess the war crime, where I described declassified operations. Name that torture, where Isabella detailed Edward's mind games. We turned trauma into dark comedy, making our audience complicit in their entertainment. The Black Cat became our unofficial co-host, appearing at perfect moments like it understood dramatic timing. It sat on Edward's casket during particularly morbid revelations, as if channeling his approval. Somewhere around 3 a.m., Isabella found Edward's hidden liquor stash, because of course he had one. To plot twist, she toasted, raising expensive scotch. And unexpected alliances, I added, clinking bottles. By then, millions were watching. Crypt Confessions was trending globally. News outlets were picking up the story. We'd turned Edward's final manipulation into something he never expected, honesty as entertainment, truth as revenge. You know, Isabella said as dawn approached, I think Edward would actually be proud. We turned his game into something bigger than he imagined. He wanted to expose your true nature, I agreed. He just didn't realize your true nature was more interesting than your false one. The chat had evolved from mockery to genuine engagement. People were sharing their own confessions, their own killed relationships, their own survival stories. Edward's cruel experiment had accidentally created group therapy for the globe. Daniel Bateswood, I need to say something. Dad wasn't just cruel to Isabella, he broke all of us systematically. Maybe it's time we stopped pretending otherwise. Margaret B. agreed. We all became monsters to survive him, At least Isabella had the courage to fight back. Patricia, I've been drunk for 30 years because of that man. Tonight's the first time I've felt sober. Even Caroline and Alexander's feed had changed. They sat apart now, no longer touching, watching with growing horror as their betrayal played out for millions. "This is bad," Alexander kept saying. "This is so bad." Caroline just stared at the screen, watching me transform from victim to victor through sheer honesty. 6. At exactly 9 a.m., we heard the lock disengage. The mausoleum door opened with theatrical precision, spilling morning light like honey into darkness. Daniel Bateswood stood in the entrance, wearing the same perfect suit but looking somehow smaller. Behind him, the entire family clustered, their faces showing something I hadn't expected: respect. "Good morning," Daniel said formally, though his eyes held wonder. "I trust the night was illuminating." Isabella and I rose, stretching muscles cramped from stone benches and emotional gymnastics. "Educational," Isabella replied. "Your father always was an excellent teacher. He just never realized the best lessons come from bad examples." We walked out together, squinting in sunlight that felt like redemption. The ground swarmed with media, news vans, reporters, photographers, all shouting questions. "Mrs. Bateswood, did you really confess to murder? Mr. McBride, what's next for the Crips survivors? Will you two start a show together?" Daniel raised his hand for silence. "The family has conferred. We watched the entire performance, and we've concluded that Isabella fulfilled both the letter and spirit of Father's will. She spent the night beside him. She revealed her true nature. She played his game and won by changing the rules." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Furthermore," Daniel continued, "we've decided not to pursue any legal action regarding her confession. Father got what he wanted, the truth. The fact that the truth included his murder seems poetically appropriate." Margaret stepped forward. "Besides, we all wanted him dead. Isabella just had the courage to do it. In a way, she did us all a favor." Sophia grinned. "Plus, that was the best entertainment we've had at a family event ever. Dad would have loved the ratings." Epilogue. 6 months later, Isabella and I sat in a Manhattan studio, preparing for another episode of our unexpectedly successful show, Confessions After Dark. The concept was simple. We interviewed people with dark secrets, creating a space where truth became entertainment and confession became catharsis. Murderers, addicts, betrayed spouses, government whistleblowers. Anyone with a story too strange for fiction but too true to ignore. Tonight's guest claims he faked his own death to escape an MLM scheme, Isabella read from her notes. Then accidentally became a Mexican soap opera star. "Sounds about right for us," I laughed. We'd become unlikely partners, bonded by shared trauma and mutual understanding. Not romantic. We'd both had enough of traditional relationships, more like survivors who'd found meaning in their scars. Caroline had divorced me quietly, taking half of very little. Last I heard, she and Alexander were working as wedding planners in Tulsa, their reputations destroyed by the live-stream revelations. Karma has a sense of humor, too. The Bateswood family had embraced the spectacle, turning their father's cruelty into a multimedia empire. Daniel now ran a streaming service specializing in extreme reality content. Margaret wrote a bestseller, Married to a Monster, Surviving the Unsurvivable. Patricia got sober and started a support group for victims of billionaire abuse. And the black cat. It lived with Isabella now, appearing on our show like a furry omen. We'd named it Edward because some jokes write themselves. "Ready?" Isabella asked as the studio lights warmed up. "Always," I replied. The camera's red light blinked on. We smiled at our audience, millions of people who'd learned that sometimes the only way to survive truth is to perform it. "Good evening," Isabella began. "Welcome to Confessions After Dark, where your secrets become everyone's entertainment. I'm Isabella Bateswood, convicted killer and widow of the year. And I'm Tom McBride, I continued, professional survivor and amateur corpse. Tonight, we're diving into the strange world of accidental celebrities and fake deaths. But first, let's check in with our favorite funeral home. The monitor showed a live feed from Shady Acres Mortuary, where Wayne now offered crypt escape rooms for tourists. Business was booming. Life was strange. Death was stranger. But the strangest thing of all, sometimes being buried alive is exactly what you need to finally start living. The cat, Edward, jumped onto my lap, purring like a furry engine of chaos. I scratched behind his ears and looked into the camera. Remember, folks, everyone's got a skeleton in their closet. We just happen to find ours in luxury caskets. The question is, what's in yours? The phone lines lit up. Another night of confessions was beginning. And somewhere, in whatever afterlife billionaire manipulators go to, Edward Bateswood was probably applauding the show he never meant to create. Death, as it turns out, is just the opening act. The real performance begins when you realize you've survived. The end. If you enjoyed this story, please support the author with a like, subscribe, and share your own dark confessions in the comments. Remember, the best stories are the ones we're afraid to tell.